So we looked at gadget code and we did the computation for this. The question said we should calculate the full cost per unit of products A, B, and C under traditional absorption costing using direct labor hours as the basis for apportionment. And we went there. Now, like I said, this question will be much more complicated in a sense than the kind of ways that absorption costing will either be tested and the whole concept of ABC will either be tested as a part A or part B style question. So, and we did a very full question just for us to be able to see the dynamics of it. Because if we did the part A or the part B, I've said, if you can just go back and rewatch that, make sure you get a clear understanding of how we solved that question so that you're able to apply that knowledge. We're still going to walk through that over this class now. So it says, first of all, that we should calculate the full cost per unit of products A, B, and C under traditional absorption costing using direct labor hours as the basis for apportionment. So we had so for us to calculate our full cost per unit, we needed to calculate first of all, our direct material cost, our direct labor cost, and then absorb our overhead using the direct labor hours as our basis for that's our level of activity in our overhead absorption rate. And so we did that clearly. And then the second part says we should calculate the full cost per unit of each product using activity-based costing. Now this together would have been 14 marks. And if we go to our computation there, we basically were able to calculate our direct material cost. Like I said, once you have this, you know where we got the $1.2 per unit multiplied by the 2 kilograms. Oh, sorry, $1.2 per kilogram multiplied by the 2 kilograms was what gave us our 2.4 for direct material cost. And we did the same thing for product B and product C. And then our overhead absorption rate, we calculated our overhead absorption rate from working one, and our work one was our total overheads. We added the total to get 195,270. And then our level of activity, we said since they asked us to use direct labor hours as our level of activity, our direct labor hour per unit multiplied by the number of units for both products A, B, and C, and we got 6,900 as the total. Then our overhead absorption rate was now our budgeted overheads, which are 195,270 divided by our total level of activity. And so we got our overhead absorption rate as this. So overhead absorption rate will be the overhead absorption rate per hour. So if we multiply that by the number of hours we use for each unit, we're able to get the value for A, for B, and for C. And so we added that to our direct material and direct labor cost to get the total cost per unit for both product A, product B, and product C. And that would have solved the first part of the question, which was to use traditional absorption costing to do this computation. So it's something I want you to just sit back and work on again. It is quite straightforward if you have put some level of practice into it. There's not very much moving parts there. The second part was now the activity-based costing. To do our activity-based costing. Okay, so something we didn't write here, so we don't get into trouble in the future. So we'll call this the gadget code. And then maybe we need to specify that is from the old question. So the sooner you do this, the better, but maybe later on you might have forgotten where we got that from. There's an old question. We have it on the group. So that helps you remember exactly where that came from. All right, now for the activity-based costing, we're still using the same direct material cost per unit and direct labor cost per unit. So we just copied and pasted that part. That was never a problem to us. Our issue now was with the overheads. And we said with the overheads for computing activity-based costing questions, that there are two ways we would need to do this computation, either volume-driven or specific activity driven. And so this was number 3, working for machine running. Since we said our cost driver was machine hours, that is hours. So our volume driven is based on hours, while the other ones are for the specific activities. So work 2, work 4, and work 5. Okay, this is supposed to be 5. Were separate workings, or they were the same thing. Work 2, work 4, and work 5 had the same structure. Work 3, on the other hand, was different because work 3 was volume driven, machine hours, while work 3, 4, and 5 were for production runs. Our cost driver was number of production runs. So we're going to get our cost driver rate as per production run. For so these two now, if we compare work 2 and work 3, we'll see the difference between the way that the specific activity driven overhead absorption, the specific activity driven cost driver rate is computed as compared to how the machine hours or the volume driven cost driver rate is computed. And you see that the volume driven one is quite shorter than the specific activity one. But why I did this was to be very, very detailed in the computation so that it helps us when we're computing subsequently. So our cost driver rate, we're using the budgeted overhead, which is specific to machine setup costs. So we had that figure as 26550, and we divided, and all our budgeted level of activity for these ones will be the level of activity. So the number of production runs for A, B, and C, add them together, we get that figure. And then we get our cost driver rate as basically the overhead cost divided by that budgeted level of activity. And then we now start doing how many units do we have in each production run. So the number of units in each production run, if we have a total of 15,000 units for A and 16 production runs, then our average number of units in one production run was 937.5. And so once we had that, then we could get our overhead cost per unit. Our overhead cost per unit will now be the cost driver rate. So this is how much we are spending on each production run. And since we have this number of units in each production run, then the amount we are spending divided by the number of units will give us how much each of these units would take as their overheads absorbed using absorption or activity-based costing. And we did that for the 3 of them. Then we also went for the machine running. It was quite similar to what we did with the overhead absorption rate. It's a similar process. So there we just had to get our cost driver rate as budgeted level of budgeted overhead divided by budgeted level of activity. We had our overhead specific to machine running, and now we needed to get this in total terms. So our 0.5 machine hours multiplied by the number of units plus the 1 for B multiplied by its own number of units plus the 1 for C multiplied by its number of units. We got that, and then we're able to get our cost driver rate. That cost driver rate will be per hour. So since we have per machine hour now, so we can extend this and say per machine hour. So if we have this per machine hour, so how many machine hours do we need for product A? 0.5. So with that, we're able to get our overhead cost per unit for A, for B, and for C. And like we said, the delivery costs and the procurement costs are identical to how we computed the working 2 for what was that again? For machine setups. So exactly the same thing. Get your cost driver rate. Or first of all, identify your cost driver, then compute the cost driver rate, get the budgeted overhead, get the budgeted level of activity, compute that cost driver rate, and then now get the number of units in each of the processes. So number of units per delivery, we've gotten that. And then from there, we can get our overhead cost per unit. So if you follow this process, then in most of the cases, you should be able to calculate whether you're using a specific activity or you're using a volume driven. These are the things I just want you to be, once you can isolate these two in your mind and walk through them, then ABC will be very doable for you. Now, finally, we got to, once we had done the 4 of them, we're able to get our cost per unit at 7.76 here. It was important that we saw what the selling price is, because if we go to the next part of the question, or the last part of the question, we'll see what they said. They said, using your calculations from A and B above, explain how activity-based costing may help Gadget Co. improve the profitability of each product. Now, what this question is saying is, now please hear this clearly. It says that using the calculations from A and B above, which we have done, explain how activity-based costing may help Gadget Co. improve the profitability of each product. So how do we improve the profitability? Now, the first thing to see here is that the selling price of product A is 7.5. When we used absorption costing, which was what we are currently using before they decided to change to activity-based costing, if you remember what the question said, when they were using absorption costing, they got a figure of 6.71 as the total cost per unit of product A, and they now put a selling price of 7.5. But when we now did our absorption accurately, once we absorbed the overheads accurately, we found out that under the accurate ABC, that the total cost per unit is actually 7.76. So what essentially happens is, if your total cost per unit is 7.76 and you're selling at 7.5, you're actually making a loss every time you sell the product. Now, if they had used absorption costing, they would have felt they were making a profit of about 80 cents, 79 cents, something like that, if my math is correct. They would have felt that they were making a profit. However, they're actually making a loss. So what activity-based costing will help them to do is to either see whether they can increase the selling price to be higher than this 7.76, or they consider ceasing the production of product A, because product A is loss-making. Now, if we flip this same argument to product C, first of all, now product C, they computed product C as having 13.42 as its total cost, and they put a selling price of 13. So it means that they would have been complaining that they are selling this product at lower than its cost price. But when they use the accurate ABC to do the computation, you find out that the cost price is actually 12.48, which is lower than the 13. And so if they can focus on making more of product C is actually profitable. Product A, however, is not profitable when they use the accurate means of absorbing their overheads. So what it essentially means is, and then product B, we see that they, when they were using the not accurate absorption costing, 10.07, when they use the accurate activity-based costing, 10.17, and they put their selling price at 12, which is healthy. So this, we didn't have any problem with product B. So while they would have said that they would consider ceasing, or they would have considered product A as very profitable and so continue producing it, really product A is loss-making. So the only thing they can do is they can consider increasing the selling, and that's where the 6 marks are going to come from. So since the when ABC is used, we find out that product A is loss-making, and so a consideration should be made about increasing the selling price, or where that is not possible, then there might be a consideration of ceasing the production of product A entirely. However, product C, that would have been seen as loss-making, is actually profitable, and so resources can be channeled to product C to increase the amount sold and thereby increase profitability. Product B, no challenge particularly, because the both under absorption costing and activity-based costing, the cost is less than the $12 selling price. And that's the real consideration we're making, that either we increase the selling price here, and then if we feel if the organization should look at this, they can see that because this is profitable, the profit margin is not very significant, 52 cents higher than the selling price. So they can consider continuing this product, continuing product B, but either increasing the selling price if that is probable or if that is possible, or ceasing the production of product A. And that's the logic that we want to see in this. Like I said, because the questions are more of objective style questions than discursive, all I just want you to see is the logic behind the argument or why they've asked us for that B part of the question, or the C part of the question rather. All right, so let's go and look at, let's try and see whether we can use this knowledge to walk through a few things. So this is how the question will come, more likely than the way that we did. It won't come the way we did that first question. That first question, I wanted us to just do the whole question so that we can see how the question works, or how to work on every single part. Now, this part will just be specific answers that they're looking for. So let's try and see whether we can walk through triple, and then subsequently we'll work on the other ones. Now you'll see your section B of the exam would have this kind of vignette where you have a some information and then a number of questions under that information. So 5 questions under that information. And then all you need to do is to use the information from the scenario to be able to answer those 5 questions. So we'll see these ones. I don't know, you usually see either 2 computational questions and 3 discursive questions for the most part, or 3 computational questions and then 2 discursive questions. That's how you generally see these questions as. So we can look at the discursive parts. So we can do them. I think brick by brick too is another ABC question. So if we can do this too, then we'll know that we've done, we have practiced ABC to a fair extent, and then it will just be more practice and concentration. So let's see the question now. The question says, Triple Co makes 3 types of gold watch: the Diva, the Classic, and the Poser. A traditional product costing system is used at present. So when they say traditional product costing system, they're talking absorption costing. So the traditional, like we said, our 2 traditional costing techniques are absorption costing and marginal costing. So absorption costing is what they're talking about here. And they said, although an activity-based costing system is being considered, details of the product lines for a typical period are, so they've given us our hours per unit, so labor hours and machine hours, our material cost per unit, and our production units. Okay. Flip the question a little bit, but not information. The largely the information will still be very similar to what we had with the gadget code that we did. Now it says, so they've given us our number of hours for labor hours and machine hours. So we'll see what they're asking us for. So direct labor hour costs $6 per hour. That's direct labor hours, fine. So cost $6 per hour. And production overheads are absorbed on a machine hour basis. So our overheads are, okay, I remember the last question was overheads were absorbed on a direct labor hour basis. But in this case, they're saying overheads are absorbed on a machine hour basis. Okay. Now the overhead absorption rate for the period is $28 per machine hour. So overhead, they've calculated the overhead absorption rate, so they're making our lives quite easy. And that's how these questions will come now. So if we did our computation of overhead absorption rate, we will get the same $28 per machine hour. Let's see. The number of machine hours 1.5, the number of units 750, then 250, and 3 7,000. Okay, okay, they didn't give us our total overhead. Okay, yes, see. So the total production overhead is 654,500. So we can find out whether we can check this 28 out just because we are practicing. It's not the kind of, under exam conditions, definitely we won't care. They've given us 28, we'll use the 28. But let's see how they got this 28. So 28 will be, they said overheads are absorbed, what? Machine hour basis, right? Overheads are absorbed on a machine hour basis. Okay, so let's use machine hour. So 1.5 times 7 plus 1 times 1,250 plus 3 times 7,000. That will be our level of activity. Then our budgeted overhead is 654,500. So we'll see that that should give us that same $28 overhead absorption rate. So let's check that out. Where should we do this now? I think I would want to shift. I think we should leave the gadget core on its own and do something else now. Abi, we should use this for the other computation.
Yes.
So let's call this triple. That means we'll be using small worksheets. Okay, so instead of ABC, let's call this gadget core. Okay. So for triple now, just to check, this one is just to help our understanding. So our overhead absorption rate, and what did we say? 654,500, right? Divided by, for A, I can't remember the figure again. I wanted to put that in my head. Please, does anybody have the question so that we don't have to be flipping back and forth? I can't remember it again. I know it's 750, 1.5. So 1.5, 1.5, 750, 1,250, and 7,000. Please just remember 1.5 times 750 first. I hope this overhead figure is correct, first of all. So 1.5 times 750 plus, what's the other one? 1 times 1,250 plus 3 times 7,000. Yes, so it gives us 28. So expectedly, we have that same 28 they gave us in the question. So in another question, they might not have computed it for you. They will require you to do that. So 28, sorry, 28 per machine hour. In this question, they had computed it for you. Why I'm doing this is, and for the better part, when we're doing questions, what will be important to me is not just answering the question that they've given you, but for you to be able to understand all the parts of the question, so that if you had another question that they had a different set of requirements or different challenges for you to execute, then you're able to know how to do them. It's just not memorizing. This question will never come out again, but the concept will be tested, and other things, some things that have been answered in this question might be the basis for asking other questions. So let's just be clear about that 28, where they got the 28 from, based on the question requirement. Now it now says that the total production overheads are 654,500, and further analysis shows that the total production overheads can be divided as follows. So costs relating to machinery, 20% of your overhead cost, while costs relating to material handling is 15% of your total overheads. Okay, so if we do 20% of 654,500, we'll get the cost relating to machinery, while the cost relating to machine handling are 15% of that 654, excuse me, 654,500. Okay, now the following total activity volumes are associated with each product line for the period as a whole. Now we have product D, product C, and product P, and number of movements of material. Okay, so that's this is the cost driver, number of movements of material relating to material handling. So they didn't give us any cost driver for relating to machinery. Relating to machinery, cost relating to machinery. Machine hours might not drive Like for me, machinery cost relating to machinery will be if we had maybe the value of the machinery, then that would help us more. If we have the value of machinery in product for division D, division C, and division P, that would have been more valuable. But the question will tell us what it wants us to do. You can't second guess. And this question is amended most likely from an originally more detailed question. So it's the information they give you that you will use. But so far, they've given us the basis for only material handling, since number of movements of material will be the cost driver for our material handling. So we'll see what the question asks us from there. Now it says, what is the cost per unit for product D using traditional methods, absorbing overhead on the basis of machine hours? They said, what's the cost per unit of product D? Using machine hours. Ugh. This is irritatingly simple, nah? So when we use overhead absorb, I want to relate this answer to what we're doing. They have already given us this. Why is everything 28? This one too is 28.3. Okay. So they've already given us the overhead absorption rate. So our overhead cost per unit will just be the overhead absorption rate multiplied by the number of hours taken for each of the products. So if we go back there, you'll see how simple this question is. Except they asked us in total terms. What's the cost per unit, cost of one unit for product D using traditional methods of absorbing overheads on the basis of machine hours? So since our overhead absorption rate is 28 per machine hour, then our cost per unit for product D will be $28 per machine hour, excuse me, multiplied by the number of machine hours for product D. And the number of machine hours for product D is 1.5. So our answer is 28 times 1.5. Oh, that's simple, if you understand it. So that's all. There's nothing else to do. It's that simple. They've given us the overhead absorption. So the question at least should not have given us the overhead absorption rate, because it almost feels criminal to be getting 2 marks for doing nothing. Okay, so we can just come here and say number 47. So the overhead absorption rate, like we said, is equal to 28. Machine hours per unit for product D is equal to, what's our machine hours per unit? 1.5. So 1.5. So therefore, the overhead per unit for product D will be equal to 28 multiplied by 1.5. That's all. Now, did they ask us what total cost? Questions will not be this simple now. So 42. What's the cost? What's the cost per unit? I knew that there was a trick inside this thing now. They asked us for the cost per unit. So our cost per unit is labor plus material plus overhead. I knew they would do you something now. The question can't be that simple. So we have done the overhead part carelessly. So I know I'm that careless, so I know I'll throw things away. So we've not done the labor and the material. So what's material cost? They've given us material cost per unit. These guys are looking for trouble. They've given us material cost per unit directly. So we have the material cost. So let's go back. So our material cost per unit is 20. That one is sorted. Okay, so total cost now. Maybe I can do this very long-winded so that you'll be able to see this. So total cost, so material is equal to, what did we see, 20, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So labor now. So our labor cost per unit, that should be simple. So our direct labor multiplied by the number of labor hours per unit. So they said our direct labor costs are $6 per hour. How many hours do we use for material for product D? 0.5. Yeah. So 6 times
Yes.
0. So our labor would now be $6 per hour multiplied by 0.5 hours per unit for labor. Okay, so now the question is a little fairer. And then overhead as calculated above. So overhead cost, I've already calculated that as 42. So the total cost per unit now, which is what they asked us for, will now be the sum of the three of them. So $65 per unit. That's our answer. The answer is 65. Straightforward. Yeah, fairly. For 2 marks, the question doesn't seem too bad. All right, now 48. Next question. Is this clear? I don't know about clear.
Sorry, sir.
Yeah, please.
I understand the workings, but I don't understand the question.
The question says, what is the cost per unit for product D using absorption costing, essentially?
Okay.
And they said,
So,
the basis of machine hours. So we're going to absorb the overheads on the basis of machine hours, but they've already given us the overhead absorption rate per machine hour. So that's solved it. So all we need to do is how many machine hours for product D? They've asked us for only product D. So our focus is only entirely on this particular line. We don't have any business with product C or product P, only product D. So first of all, we need to get what is our material cost per unit. They've given us directly there. Usually in the other question, we had to compute our material cost per unit. All right, so once we've done the material, then our labor now, please be careful about this is for labor hours, this is for machine hours. Machine hours were the basis for our absorption. So when we calculated our overhead absorption rate, we use these three figures. But for labor hours, labor will give us our labor cost per unit. So our labor cost per unit will be 0.5, which is half, multiplied by the cost per hour, 6. And then our overheads have already, we said it was 28 multiplied by 1.5 would have given us the cost per unit, the overhead cost per unit. So the concept of this is not too dissimilar definitely from how we calculated overheads, how we calculated our full cost per unit for Gadget Co. So by the time you've done a few questions, then you'll be able to just spend a little time on it, not jumpy, just focus on it and you see that they're doable. So we got our first question, our cost per unit for product D. Now, 48 says, what's the total amount of machining overhead that would be allocated to product C for the period using ABC? The total amount of machining overhead. This was the one for machining. Okay, this was material movement. Okay, machinery. So the total overhead that will be allocated to product C. Seems very simple. To product C for the period using ABC. Okay. So cost relating to machinery are 20%. So we'll get 20% of our total overhead. That will be the cost, the machining cost, the total cost to machining. Then we want to get how much we give to product C. So how do we decide that now? To product C. Okay. So if I give into product C now, so if we're using machine hours as our basis, since it's machining, then we'll have this multiplied by the number of units, that multiplied by the number of units, that multiplied by the number of units. So that will give us all our cost driver rate, if you will. So that cost driver rate now will now, they said for product C, right? So for product C, we will now be giving it the 1,250. I don't know whether I'm making any sense.
So I
Okay,
said
so
we'll be giving the 1,250.
yes, we'll now, because they said the total. So in total terms, if we get our cost driver rate per unit, then multiplied by the number of units, we'll get the total, because they've asked us the total amount of machining overhead for product C, not the cost per unit, but the total we should give to product C. So I've seen this in my head a little. So first of all, what's total cost for machinery? 20% of that. Then I don't think there's this straightforward process to that. Then our cost driver rate, we'll need to get our cost driver rate for this. Our cost driver rate will be that total overhead, the overhead to machine divided by the level of activity. So 1.5 times this, 1 times this, and 3 times this. We'll get the cost driver rate per machine hour. And then since there are 1,250 units, then we'll be getting that for machining. So let's try and work that. I think it'll become clearer as we work it. The amount of machining overheads that will be allocated to product C. Okay, once we are quoting that, so I have to flip back and forth anyways. So first of all, total overheads for machining is equal to 20% of, what's that figure? 654,500, right? We wrote it somewhere here, 654,500. Okay, so first step. So that's our total overheads for machining. Okay. Now we're going to have to break this down into which one should we give to product D? Products, is that products? What did they ask us for? Product C, right?
Product C. Yeah, product C.
So first of all, what I'm also thinking is there a simple way to do this thing as compared to just doing something that's unnecessary? So machine hours and number of units. So this is volume driven. So if I want to get my cost driver rate, my cost driver rate will now be per machine hour. So what's the total number of machine hours of product C? This one really spoils it because it's still 1 multiplied by 1,250. Doesn't make any difference. Okay, so we'll get our cost driver rate. So from here, the cost driver rate will be equal to the budgeted overheads divided by the budgeted level of activity, which will be equal to 130,900. Now this is where the work is divided by, now we have to do the division of that now. Machine hours, right? Machining, so it's similar to what we did on top. So 1.5 I wanted to be lazy and just go and copy it from the top since we've done that before. Times 750 plus 1 times 1250. Now where this would, where we'll need something will be if we get our cost driver rate and specify that cost driver rate. There's a reason why I do that, because it helps me to get clarity on what I am saying. So if I get this now, let's see what this figure is. So 5.6 per machine hour. So the next thing now is the total number of machine hours for product C, which is 1 multiplied by 1250, which is essentially 1250. So now we can now get our total cost, total overheads to product C relating to machine hours will be equal to 5.6 multiplied, so our overhead absorption rate multiplied by the total machine hours. The only thing I think I've done is made, it's quite long, so 7,000 machine hours. That'll be my answer. Do you get the point? I've actually gone, maybe there'll be, of course, there'll be easy ways to just multiply it straight out. But I'm trying to follow the logic of what I'm thinking. So first of all, I need to get, what's the total overheads for machinery? So if I can get the total overheads for machinery, then the next thing will be, what's my cost driver rate? Why I needed that cost driver rate was, this is the amount I will charge per hour. This is the amount I will charge per hour. So if I can get how much I charge per hour, and I get how many hours I am spending on product C, then I can get the total amount that should be charged to it. So if you go back to the question, you see what the question asked you for. So the question says, what's the total amount of machining overhead that should be allocated to product C for the period? When is your camera coming on?
What?
When is your camera coming on?
Next week now.
All right. Number 3. What is the overhead assigned to product D in respect, product D again? Yeah, but what's the overhead assigned to product D in respect of material handling? That's the one we're interested in. The material handling was the one that had all the whole cost driver things. Okay, so what's the overhead assigned to product D in respect of material handling using ABC? The overhead assigned to product D, that's in total terms or per unit. No specification. We can't do it in. Yes, we can. So did they tell us in total terms or per unit? What's the overhead assigned to product D? That should be in total terms now. If it's in total terms, it's too simple. Okay, so how do we do this now? The overhead assigned to product D in respect of material handling using ABC. So we'll do our cost driver rate again. So our budgeted overhead, remember we're saying for material handling. So cost relating to material handling, 15% of the total. So we'll get 15% of that total. That's our budgeted overhead divided by level of activity. The level of activity in this case is this plus this plus this, which is 120. They've already given us the total, which is good. So we'll get our cost driver rate. That is our overhead per movement of material. So we'll spend that for every movement of material. How many movements of materials do we have for product? What did they ask us for product D? We'll have 12 for product D. And from there, we'll get our answer. The only other thing is the number of units. So these units are for product D, and that's the number of units of product D in 1 will be 750 divided by 12, while product C will be 1250 divided by 21, and product P will be 7,000 divided by 87. That's the number of units, but they've asked us for the total. So they said, what is the overhead assigned to product D in respect of material handling? So first of all,
I'm sorry, sir.
yes, please.
If it's not total, how would the question be?
That's what, then they would have said, what will be the overhead assigned to product D, to a unit of product D in respect of material handling? That would now make sense. Because now that they've told us product D, they didn't specify, so it has to be in total terms. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. Okay, so we go to work that out. All right, so 49. So what do we do now? Overhead for material, is it material handling now? Yeah. So overheads associated with material handling will be equal to 15% of total, which is 15% multiplied by, what's that figure? 654,500. Okay, so now once that's done, now, so if we have that, then our cost driver rate, so our cost driver rate now will be equal to, what's that? Okay, so 98175 multiplied by divided by 120, Abi. So we said 120 in total. I can't remember, 87 plus something plus something. Switching back and forth is not fun. So that's that. Per movement of material, Abi. So our overhead cost for product was product D, Abi. We have now shortened that. So I'd have liked to say, first of all, the total number of times you handle product D will be how many? How many was that? 120. I don't remember what it was. 12. 12. What's the total? 12. So the one with 87 will have a lot more. 98,000. So overhead cost for product D is 12, will be 818. There's something that I'm thinking, multiplied by 12. 818, okay. That's 9,000. Out of how many? Out of how much do you have? That's like half of it. All right, so that's that. That's our figure. So we're using 12, where it's going to move 12 times. So the total associated with it will be 12 multiplied by the overhead, by the cost driver rate. And that's that. So it's quite straightforward. We'll go to the next one. Now, Triple is attempting to identify the correct cost driver for a cost pool called quality control. Okay, so this is now logic, the kind of thing you might see first in the exam. For a cost pool called quality control, we want to control quality. So number of inspections will work. Straightforward. Maybe I've seen the question a number of times, but quality control, I want to control quality. How do I control quality? I inspect it a lot now. So I've seen my answer already. So it might not be, I don't know, I'm not sure whether it's because I've seen it before that it just came to my mind. Unfortunately, I've spoiled the question. So using the drop-down list below, which will be the correct cost driver to use? Number of units produced. I want to control quality. Has nothing to do with the number of units. Number of inspections, labor hours, number of machine setups. Obviously, Abby. Is it fine? See, there'll always be the bonus questions. The issue is when the bonus questions come, make sure you're able to see that they are that simple. Can everybody hear me? So, yeah? What would you have chosen? So drop it down. What would you have chosen?
Number of
Obviously. So the number of inspections would help to improve or at least inspect, control. Answer will be number of inspections. Inspections with an S. Okay. So the discursive part in this particular one was exceptionally simple, at least that first one. Let's see the second one. If Triple decides to adopt ABC, which of the following is a disadvantage that Triple may encounter as a result of this decision? ABC, complication will be difficult to. So ABC can only be applied to production overheads. What's a disadvantage? Disadvantage to who? Disadvantage compared to absorption costing. Can only be applied to overheads. No. Production overheads, but that's not a disadvantage, even if it's true. The cost per unit may not be as accurate as under traditional absorption costing. True or false? True or false? All right, so if what's a disadvantage? Benefits obtained from ABC might not justify the cost. That's obviously the right one. It will not provide much insight into what drives overhead costs. It will not provide much insight. It could provide insights. The cost per unit may not be as accurate as, that's absolutely false. That's the opposite of absorption costing is the one that you're not sure, will not give you accuracy. Activity-based costing will give you accuracy, but the benefits obtained from ABC might not justify the cost. ABC is difficult, it's more expensive to implement. So if you're not careful, you might actually not get the benefits associated with that cost you're incurring. So that benefits may not justify cost is the correct answer. Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the other question, brick by brick now. No, the discussive parts were simpler. Okay, so we said so same thing, 5 questions under the scenario. So let's read the scenario. Brick by Brick is a building business that provides a range of building services to the public. Recently, it has been asked to quote for garage conversions and extension to properties, and has found that it is winning fewer garage conversion contracts than expected. In addition, Brick by Brick is also produces and sells different types of bricks to the construction industry. The three types of bricks, the three type of brick produced are clay, concrete, and reclaimed bricks. BBB has a policy to price all jobs at budgeted cost plus 50%. So that's cost plus markup. Overheads are currently absorbed on a labor hour basis. Triple B thinks that a switch from ABC, sorry, a switch to ABC from Triple B thinks that a switch to ABC to absorb overheads, okay, would reduce the cost associated with GC and hence make them more competitive. You are provided with the following data. So overhead categories, supervisors, planners, property related, and total. And then the drivers, so they've identified the drivers for us. So site visits will relate to supervisors, and planning documents will relate to planners, and labor hours will relate to property related. Okay. So who is this for? This data is for GC or for both of them. So total overheads. So okay, 40,000 overheads, and then the different activities. Now they said a typical GC takes 300 labor hours to complete. So GC takes 300 labor hours to complete. A GC requires only one site visit by a supervisor and needs only one planning document to be raised. And EX requires 6 site visits. So EX will have more overhead. So 6 site visits compared to 1 for GC, and 5 planning documents compared to 1 again for GC. Now they said, what are the total overheads assigned to GC using labor hours to absorb the overheads? Using labor hours to absorb the overheads. And so our overhead cost per hour will be our total overheads divided by our total level of activity. So labor hours is 40,000. So our total overhead, 400,000 divided by 40,000 will give us $10 per labor hour.
Oh,
And then how many labor hours do you need for GC? 300. So 300 and 3,000 as our answer. So our answer is 3,000. It's quite, we can actually even do that with our head. So that's straightforward. The first question. So let's see for GC. Are we going to put 2 of them together? Are we doing this in the same place, or we'll use another sheet for this? Which one makes it easier for you to read?
Another sheet.
Because it doesn't make any difference. If we use 10,000 sheets, it's still not adding any or reducing anything for us. What do we call it? Brick by brick, BBB. Okay, so that's 51 now, I think.
No, 52.
52. So what did they ask us for?
Overhead absorption.
So what's the total overhead assigned? So
400.
overheads. So first of all, our cost driver rate will be equal to budgeted overhead divided by budgeted level of activity. Level of activity in this case is labor hours. That's 400 divided by 40,000. Is there any need to state that? So if there's any other thing we should add, I'll be glad to. So 10 per, what's that? Labor hour, yeah. So number of hours for GC is equal to 300. So therefore now, the overhead cost for GC is equal to 300 multiplied by $10 per hour.
It's 3,000.
That gives us 3,000. And some of these questions are exceptionally easy once you get what the question is asking you. Okay, I think that answers that. So what's the total overhead assigned to a GC? So you see the difference, what you asked before, to a GC, to one GC, not to the total
Yeah.
GC. So you'll see it, but one has to be careful about what you're clear about, whether they ask you for one or for the total. So to a GC here and to one GC. So since we need 300 labor hours to complete a GC, then 300 times the overhead absorption rate will give us what we need. Now, what's the total overhead assigned to a GC using ABC principles in respect of supervisor's cost? Still GC again. Supervisor's cost, they said, okay, we have this. So site visits. So first of all, we'll be able to get, we have our overhead here. So overhead divided by the level of activity. They've already given us this in total number of activities per year. So this divided by this will give us our dollars per site visit. Then how many site visits does a GC need? 1. So 1 times that figure will give us our answer. Question is dead. It's too straightforward. They would have asked us for an EX now because the EX will now have needed 5 site visits. That would be more interesting, or 6 site visits. That would be more interesting. Okay, so they asked us for GC, so we have to stay with the GC. First of all, we'll get our overhead absorption, sorry, our cost driver rate again. What's that, 9,000? What did I say? 9,000 divided by 500, right? 90,000.
Yes.
Okay.
So I put
But visit cost for a GC, one GC, Abby. So first of all, our cost driver rate will be the budgeted overhead over the budget level of activity. Was that 500 there? This one was 90,000. I think it's 900,000. So 90,000. So $180 per site visit. So we can say since GC requires 1 site visit, the overhead per site visit for 1 GC will be equal to 180 multiplied by 1, which is 180. I hope they didn't ask us in totals for this one.
No.
Okay, so if they didn't ask us anything else, then that's the answer, 180. Let's make sure we can track them. Total overheads assigned to a GC, okay, still to a GC, to one GC, okay. So that's 180. Okay, then the next question says, what are the total overheads assigned to an EX using ABC principles in respect of planning costs? So we're still going to do the same thing. This divided by this will give us the amount per planning document. That'll give us the amount per planning document. And then EX requires 5 planning documents. So an EX now will now be that figure multiplied by 5. And that gives us our answer. So 70,000 divided by, so overheads. So planning overheads to an EX. Essentially what we want to do. Our cost driver rate will be equal to, is that 70,000 divided by 2?
Yes.
Okay, so 70 divided by 250. So 280 they call it planning document.
Mm.
So since one EX requires 5 planning documents, overheads to EX will be equal to 280. Okay. And with that,
Well,
so 1,4. So that's all. Okay, so let's see whether we can reason with the. Okay, so that's fine. I don't know if there's any question.
no, sir.
Questions are quite straightforward. Okay, so let's see. Can you look at 55 and 56 and see whether we can make sense out of it? So the absorption cost and ABC, the absorption cost and that's absorption costing and ABC cost per service have now been correctly calculated as follows. So they've given us this cost. Which of the following statements are the following statements true or false? So I like that. And then which of the following statements about break by break and the use of ABC is true? Okay. So let's see if we can get this discussive part. Changing to a system of ABC should lead to a more competitive price being charged for the GC. Is that true or false?
True.
True. Obviously, from what we even said with the last discussion we had for.
Yeah, that was what I remember.
Yeah, so true, absolutely true. Changing to a system of ABC should lead to a more competitive price. That's true. Then using ABC will cause the total overhead cost to increase. True or false?
False.
False, because whether you use ABC or you use
the overheads will remain.
Exactly. I think we said that yesterday. So overheads will remain the same. Overheads don't change. It's just the complexity of the process that changes, but your overheads will remain the same. So that's a false statement. So first true, second false. That's fine. Then which of the following statements about brick by brick and the use of ABC is true? Traditional absorption approach, that's absorption costing, now gives a better indication of where cost savings can be made.
No.
No, that's not true. It doesn't give you any, there's no cost savings on any of them. You're just allocating the costs. So we don't have any cost savings. It's target costing, that kind of thing that will give you a cost saving approach. ABC and absorption costing do not do anything per cost saving. So that's not a true statement. ABC is a cheaper system for BBC than absorption costing. True or false?
I'm not sure.
ABC is more complicated, so ABC will be more expensive as a system. It will actually be more expensive as a system, so that's not a true statement. ABC eliminates the need for cost apportionment. Nah, ABC doesn't eliminate. You apportion costs just like we did with absorption costing. You apportion some costs in ABC, just like with absorption costing. So cost apportionment is part of an integral part of any kind of absorption costing principle, whether ABC or the traditional absorption costing itself. ABC improves pricing decisions. Since we've gotten to the end, that can only be the correct answer. And we saw this that when we're using 6.71 as compared to 7.76, that if we had a more accurate allocation of costs, then we would have better pricing decisions. So ABC will improve pricing decisions, true. The other three statements are false. So we'll say, what did we say? True, false. Since allocation is more accurate, then it will improve the pricing decision. All right, so we'll take, if you want, I could send this over. Then we'll take this as our assignment. Oh, true. Okay, not ready yet. So please just remind me to send this. So our assignment will be 2 assignments now. The one we're supposed to do. So we'll look at the criticisms, merits and criticisms of ABC, and then we'll read on environmental accounting. So which one did we have before? We didn't talk about it. The throughput and theory of constraint assignment. Was anybody able to do it?